Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. We are back. Jimmy and Joe are back. The weekly show coming to you on a Saturday this time, just because of travel and because, we got, we're at spring break. I don't know if you guys, obviously you're not, but we have spring break right now in terms of, our school. So our family's going to kind of get away for a couple days, which would be nice. And so that's kind of where we're at. So Saturday morning, we are excited to be here. Jimmy, I'm looking, have you take a look. What do you think? Cricket Cup sweatshirt, Jimmy.
Cricket
Cup sweatshirt, Jimmy. This is the coffee shop on site run by incredible teachers, Emily Kubo, Brittany Morrison, Nicole McAvoy, Kelly Spakeen, doing incredible things with their kids. And they got me a sweatshirt. I mean, come on, how cool is that? It's a Cricket Cup. I mean, they may end up selling more merch than coffee at some point. People are going to want this, Jimmy. People are going to want this sweatshirt, Jimmy. I know it. Look at that. Look at that.
I'm just impressed that they know who the superintendent is. I mean, that in itself is impressive. That's just all I got.
All right. Okay. All right. Yeah. Well played.
Check this out, Joe Sanfilippo. You got sweatshirt gear. I've got gratitude gear. This is coming from my good friend Jim Jeske from Bismarck Public Schools. So
fantastic.
For all you listeners out there, please keep this handsome young man in your prayers, please. So good. He's a good man. Jim Jeske, principal, Bismarck Public Schools. So gave me that this week. So I'm very grateful for his friendship and just very grateful that we are on a Saturday morning and we get to do what we love to do, Joe Sanfilippo. And that's talk about leadership, because it's always about leadership, right? Leadership always. So,
and so I had a chance this week. I was at McCall in Michigan, which I think is just an incredible conference. Mark Smith does a phenomenal job, and his team was just on point. And it was really nice to see everybody kind of back in the mix of connecting and doing things together and really kind of laughing and just being together. And it was really fantastic. And one of the things that we talked about, I got a chance to run like a leadership forum, and one of the biggest pieces of the leadership forum was talking to people about how we can build capacity to lead. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times what ends up happening in this position, and a lot of times what we're seeing across the country when we talk to people, is that it's getting really, really, it continues to get isolating. Even when things are getting better in terms of kind of coming back to normal for the most part, it's still becoming really, really isolating for leaders in this space. And I think, what we want to do is try to create some capacity to lead when we're in those times of crisis. So when we get out of them, we still have more leaders to lean on and kind of work forward with. So, you would say a lot, Jimmy, those powerful words that I need your help. And I think sometimes when we get into situations where we don't know the answer, asking for help when we don't know the answer is really, really difficult, because we're deemed as the leader in that space. And so we're thinking about how we can develop capacity to lead and be vulnerable enough to say, I need your help. At the same time, know and understand that we're still leading the building in every capacity that we can. And that was kind of the conversation that we had at the leadership forum, and talked about how we could lead in different ways and create these moments that amplify leadership around, and therefore can build capacity, so we're not feeling like we're doing this alone. So that's kind of what my week looked like. And it was great just to kind of be in a space that people wanted to connect and talk and move forward. And my hope always is that when I speak to groups, my hope is always that they walk away with one or two things, but more importantly, that they take a step back and realize the things that they're already doing are really good, and they want to make sure that we keep the good things moving forward. Because if you just concentrate on the shiny new toy that you found at a conference, then the shiny new toy takes up all the time, and the great stuff that was happening kind of gets pushed off to the side. And then 6 months from now, you're like, man, we used to do this thing and it was awesome. We should bring it back. And then it takes longer to bring back when it never should have left to begin with. Mm-hmm. So the two things that we talk a lot about is the idea that you can take a couple of things away here, but at the same time, make sure that you concentrate on the things that are going really, really well, because we really want to keep those things going into practice.
Yeah, I always tell people, hey, when you leave here, be careful when you go back to your buildings, because you do realize your people do know you're at a PD day, right?
Right.
Crap. They must have been at a PD day. I can just tell. They're coming back with all these ideas, right? So it's a good point that you make. So, hey, Thank you for those that are joining us here this morning. Andrew Murata, thank you. Amy's just, I wish we had stock in the company because I think Amy would buy some. That's
probably buy some stock.
So Amy, thank you for being here. Sonia, thank you. I know she was here on last week, so thank you for coming back. Monica, good morning. Dan says, hey, I went to grad school with Jeske and he never gave me a thing. Well, Dan, before you get your feelings hurt, I wouldn't give you a thing either if you didn't know how to spell my name, buddy. It's Jeske. I don't want to hear it's a typo. I don't want to hear that. I'm just joking, Dan. That's awesome. I will be sure to say I'll see Jim in a couple of weeks. I'll tell him you jumped on here and shared something about him. So maybe you and I can talk.
Andrew wants me to turn the heat up, man. It's Wisconsin, and let's be clear about what's happening right now. I mean, it's cold all the time. It's actually pretty nice out. There's not a lot of snow anymore, but I'm still cold. We're trying to save money in the district over the weekend.
Right.
That's what we're trying to do.
That's right. Good morning, Stacy Green. Yes, thank you for joining us here this morning. So please forgive Joe and I, because honestly, sometimes we don't get a chat during the week, and so we were just catching up before we jumped on the show. So it is our show. So we just want to talk about us, just like catch up for the week for like 5 minutes before we get going. So
that's exactly right.
If I would have caught you in the airport last night, we literally just missed each other by minutes in the Minneapolis airport last night. So, but anyway, having said that, Joe, this week I was in Bismarck and we were talking. One of the things, and as we were just talking about this time of year, I think one of the most difficult challenges that we face as school district leaders at this time of the year, and I mean, obviously all educators, teachers as well, but from a leadership perspective, I think this is one of the toughest stretches. Number one, we came back from holiday break and people have been going full board, whether it's 3 months, 3.5 months, some are still, haven't had a spring break. Some don't even get a spring break.
Yeah.
Some are having to go all the way to Easter. I mean, that is a long stretch, right? The good news is we did have daylight savings time, so at least we get an hour of light again. So hopefully that helps a little bit. But the fact that we're closing a school year and opening another school year at the same time, I think that is where it just comes at you 100 miles an hour. All the things that we have to think about, right? Evaluations are due. We feel the crunch about that. And from everything from certified to our non-certified, we got registration. We're thinking about, we're trying to get that master schedule finished up. We just got a bazillion events going on this time of the year, right? Why do we keep doing that, by the way? Why do we just pack everything at the end of the year? Like, let's just spread it out a little bit, right? And but there is something about the end of the year. It is March Madness. So for those that athletics and theater and show choir and speech and debate, we got AP exams coming up. I mean, just everything just comes at this time of the year. So I can understand why people are exhausted. So it's a reminder again, right, Joe? And you're talking about building capacity. And so Joe and I were talking here this morning. We talked about maybe just 3 things that we wanted to, just as a reminder, to encourage all leaders in terms of best practices. Now, let's just be really honest. These are just opinions by me and Joe, okay? Joe and I do not have a monopoly on leadership. So I'd like to hear your comments in the box about what are some best practices that all leaders should think about doing, right? And especially not only this time of the year, but let's take it from this point of the year till the opening of school year. So we'll start with one. We'll just start going down the road or down the line. If anyone wants to jump into the studio with us this morning, we'll go ahead and drop the link in here for those of you who want to just say, hey, I'm in, I'll jump in, and then share 1 or 2 best practices that you think effective school leaders or district leaders do, right? To make a high-performing culture, right? To create that culture of excellence that we all want for our staff and our community. So here is one, and this is, again, just a thought, an idea. Here's one I get all the time, Joe, that I don't know what to do with sometimes because I'm trying to help people understand there's a difference between saying, for those administrators who have teams. Now, we do recognize that many administrators are flying solo in their school, right? They don't have an assistant principal. They don't have a dean of students. Typically, you still have a counselor. You probably have a secretary. You might have an instructional coach or a behavior specialist, somebody who makes up that team. But here's my point. If I hear one more time somebody say, well, we meet all the time and we talk all the time. People, that is not the same as meeting on a formal weekly basis at a regular set time. Schools are hard to run. Districts are hard to run. We have to meet on a regular basis to talk through. Organization is key. Communication is key. And if we're not communicating effectively, if we're not organized, if we're dropping the ball, if we're scrambling at that last minute, every time that happens, we take a credibility hit. And so I'm going to encourage administrators, if you haven't been meeting regularly with your team, get back to it, right? Some of us start off really strong in the beginning of the year, and this time of the year it's getting busy, and so we just start looking for reasons that we can't meet, right? If I have a weekly meeting, standing meeting, then we need to make sure we're doing that. Principals, this is our opportunity to grow and develop our people. This is an opportunity for us to stay organized, to make sure we're communicating, to make sure we're working together as a high-performing team. But it's critical that we, as one unit, and I always say, one breakdown by any one of our administrators, we all take a hit for it.
Yeah.
That's how important it is, that we're all on the same page. We're taking care of each other. And as my friend Dan Butler says, let's give other people permission to help us be great, right? Let's give people permission to help us be great. So anyway, that's one thing I was thinking about this morning, Joe. I don't know what you're thinking about. And I'll take the chat box with people share.
I'll tell you that that's of all the things that we try to get done here, that's one of the things that I struggle with the most because of how things just flow throughout the course of the year. And being in a building where we can see each other on a daily basis really quickly and not have to connect, not feel like we have to connect formally, does hurt our team. Absolutely. And that's my responsibility to get better at that. So that's a great reminder for me because, you think about the idea that you talk to these people. For us, I talk to them, every day that I'm here, I'll see them somewhere. And so we talk and touch base and that kind of thing. But for the most part, when it comes down to moving everybody forward, we got to find a way to make sure that that's a formal conversation. And at the beginning of the year, through October, through November, it feels like it's always something that we do. But then when we get into the toughest times of the year, where it's really about like making sure that things are organized, then we find ourselves in a spot where sometimes it just kind of like it gets pushed off to the side. Let's be really honest, because of the day-to-day operation of what goes on. And I got to be better about that. So, I mean, that's a great reminder for me. I think the one thing that we want to do from a leadership lens is give yourself an opportunity to do it like an audit of where you're at and things that you're doing well and things that you want to get better at. And, you just mentioned like people know when you go to a conference and how you can do things better when you come back. And I often tell people that if your first meeting after a break or a conference with your staff starts with, I read this book over break, or I went to this session at this conference, you're like, just either duck because something's going to get thrown at you, or like learn how to run really fast because you're going to have to go. And because we do that to each other a lot, we're prisoners of the moment when it comes to these great ideas. At the same time, if those get pushed off, if those push off other great things that we're already doing, we're not better for it. And people are always on edge because they don't know when they're going to have to change the practice that they're utilizing. So, yeah, I think for me, I need to be better about consistent scheduling. But I also want to make sure that that everybody's clear on the fact that don't push off the great things that are already happening for the new toy that you think might be great. And this might be a great time to start writing some things down that you want to look at going into next year, right? As opposed to we're close to April here, right? And we're talking about the last push. The last push should really be about building your people up and making sure that there's as much consistency as possible in a time where a lot of things are just not consistent. Right? There's going to be so many things that happen over the course of the next couple of years. Think about just from a spring sports standpoint, like everything gets rescheduled. So kids are leaving out of class at the end of the day and everything that goes along with it. Sometimes you're going to have to, different subs and everything that goes along with that piece of it too. Just that kind of shakes people up. So try to be consistent. Try to be the known in the unknown world. Right now, just be the known entity in an unknown world. That will help out everything moving forward.
Great point, Joe. Andrew Morado, yes, we'd love to have you jump into the studio with us. So I think there's the link. When you click on it, when you jump in, remember to close one of the tabs for the feedback purposes there. But we would love to have you in there. So we'll give you a couple minutes to jump in and join us. Absolutely. And as we were talking about this whole idea of allowing other people to help us, remember building administrators, administrative assistants. They're assistants to help us administer, right? They keep us on track. They keep us organized. They make sure we get to our meetings on time. They're our confidant partners, right? They're keeping us scheduled. They're there to help us, support us, but we also have to take care of them. I know a lot of our secretaries right now are taking a lot of hits, right? They're taking calls. People sometimes aren't the kindest, sometimes even nasty. And so we've got to make sure that we're checking in regularly with them. How are they doing? It's just really important that we take care of them as well. We're also in the hiring season, right? We can go on 100 different tangents about hiring, right? I still think it is the most important thing that we as school leaders do. But unfortunately, time and time again, I still see it as the place in which we invest the least amount of time.
Right.
And again, I get it. I think it's the time of the year. Some people have a bazillion people that they're hiring and they just begin to just go through it quickly. They're checking the box. And let's be honest, Joe, there is no class in principal school that taught us how to hire. And so we struggle with that. And yet it's the most important thing we do. So I would strongly encourage you to consider, how are you doing your hiring? How are you connecting with people? Do you have screeners? Are you asking people to teach lessons? What's the interview team look like? How are you formulating the interview questions? Are you giving people a voice in that? Are you creating look-fors? In other words, if you're going to write a question, remember, bad question, bad results.
Yeah.
So we got to make sure that we're investing time to write really effective questions. I'm always a believer that some of those questions should be about your core values. They should align with your core values. They should have look-fors. In other words, why are we asking this question? What are we looking for? I'm still a believer that we should have rubrics when we're scoring. Let's be honest. Nobody, again, if we didn't learn how to hire in principal school, teachers surely didn't learn how to hire either. And we can't just put teachers on interview teams and not give them some training about, when we're interviewing, here's some things to remember that are really important, right? All these things are really important. But at the end of the day, here's one thing I always remembered. When people came in, let's say we're going to bring 3 people on campus. Here's what's going to happen. 2 of the people aren't going to get the job. So how do we create an experience, right? When you think about Culturize, core principle number 3, carry the banners about how do we create experiences for others that when 2 of those candidates leave the building and don't get the job, are they going to carry the banner for our school, right? That's how you have to see the interview process. People, it is an opportunity for us to showcase our excellence, our greatness, all the things that we're doing, but it's also how we behave and how we treat and how we make people feel for the 1 hour or 2 hours that they're in our building, right? Are we setting them up for success? Why is that important? Because if we hire someone, we should be communicating the reason we're setting you up for success is because if we do hire you, then our expectation is that you remember this, so you're setting our kids up for success, right? And are we giving staff an opportunity, when candidates, I should say, come in, are we giving them a tour of the building? I mean, I want candidates to know what they're getting, right? What you see is what you get. I want you to see the classrooms. I want you to see your area. I want you to meet the other members of the team. I want it to be a little informal. Are we giving them opportunities to talk to students? I mean, these are all very important things that we should be doing during our interview process. But I think sometimes we convince ourselves we just don't have time to do it. People, bad hire is going to create all sorts of issues, not for you, but your culture. And if we don't have time now, imagine when we get a bad hire. The documentation, the amount of complaints, the amount of meetings, the tier 3 intensive assistance plans. I mean, we can go on and on and on. What happens with a bad hire? And I think we know that. And so we have to just be really intentional.
Yeah.
So
one of the things that we try to do here that I think has been probably the most impactful when it comes down to the interview process is making sure that we create an experience for the people that are part of the conversation, right? So think about it this way. So you put yourself in a situation where you've created the opportunity through great questioning, through conversations with your staff, through this is what it's going to look like. But at the same time, if you take a look at the questions that you ask, and the questions that you ask really get to the core principles of who you are and who they are as a candidate, now we can really kind of dive into the stories that they tell throughout the course of the interview. So then when we get to the point where we're actually, asking someone to come and join us, are we creating a moment for them that they're going to remember when they come to join us? If we're listening, they're telling stories about the impact of a teacher or the impact of whatever the case may be, or a practice that they currently do. How are we connecting that to the offer that we make to make sure that the person in charge or the person that's coming in knows and understands that we were intently listening to who they are as a person. And this is one of the reasons why. So we spend time thinking about, honestly, how we're going to make the job offer for two reasons. One, we want to create a memory. We want to create a moment for the person that's coming into the building. But the second thing is we are in a teacher shortage. Let's be real clear about that, right? And we want to make sure that we get the best candidate in our situation. And we may not be able to, compensate people at the level that other groups are, but can we create an environment where people want to work and want to live? And if that's the case, hopefully we can move people forward. It's not always the case. It really isn't. But at the same time, I really hope that our staff does a phenomenal job of trying to create moments on the offer that people want to lean into and listen to, like from making sure that we connect to a story that they had in the past, or when we do press conferences, when we make hires, to make sure that people know and understand that they're coming on site, and like little things like that make a huge difference as to whether or not people are going to say I'm in or I'm out.
Yeah, but it's just the investment of time and the connections.
Yeah,
and you have to remember that the connections are so powerful. And we have an opportunity to model for our own team how important those connections are and how we make those connections. But it really comes back to how intentional are we being and making sure that happens. So having said that, Andrew Marotta is in the house.
How you doing, boss?
Welcome.
Good morning, fellas. Great to be on with you and interviewing. I interviewed all day yesterday. And Jimmy, I got to tell you, I implemented a number of things that I heard you speak at the National Principal Conference back in 2019. And they work, right? Those student ambassadors, those tours, and getting the person to wanting to work for us versus are they good enough, right? So we do a number of those things, even reserving the parking spot, giving them my cell number, leading them in to be successful in the interview versus, some huge committee of 10 people that intimidates the person. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Andrew, talk to us a little bit about what's one thing that you found as you're interviewing here. Talk to us a little bit about one experience or maybe one story, or can you think of something right now that just maybe touched your heart, or something that happened during an interview process or an experience, whether it was this year or last year here recently. But and by the way, tell the audience a little bit about what you do and where you live.
Yeah, I'm a principal. Thanks, guys. I'm a principal in Port Jervis, New York, hour and a half northwest of New York City. Joe Sanfilippo's family over near us, Tom Ricard, brother-in-law, all that good stuff. But I'm a native New Yorker from the city, and leading and surviving and thriving just like many of us on here. But along those lines, Jimmy, Joe, you're talking about time, right? I never used to call the person, right? I picked out what I saw on the paper. I'd have my secretary set up the interviews. If the interview was at 10 o'clock, they showed up at 9:45. They sat in the waiting room, and then they came in at 10 o'clock to the office. And that's what I used to do. But you changed my mindset. You just changed it. I make the time now, and I do the calls, and I do a little pre-screening. Hey, your resume got our attention. I just wanted to ask you about a couple things. And you do that little mini interview on the phone to get a feel for the person. I was also locked into the time frames. The interviews are 10, 10:45, 11:30, and 12:15. If they couldn't make it, sorry. We're flexible now, right? I'm moving the times. I'm doing virtual interviews. Here's a quick story. We interviewed somebody who we hired. Last year, it was in June. It was late. And she was doing a leave replacement at a school in Long Island. And we're an hour and a half northwest of New York City. So I said, we need you in person. This is a demo lesson. We need you in person. And she accepted the interview. She called my cell phone later that night because I gave her my number. And she said, listen, I just cannot leave my kids on the last day of classes. I told them I was be there. We're doing a special project. Like, I can't leave them on the last day. I mean, here's this teacher saying, wow, she can't leave it. I adjusted. We let her do virtual, and she blew it out of the park. And we hired her without her ever coming up in person. She came up this summer, and she's a home run. But she showed her true character by not leaving her kids on the last day of school. And that meant a lot to us versus an in-person demo. So a little story about us being flexible, but a candidate shining through.
Yeah, look at the benefits that come from that. And this is important for the audience to understand, right? There's reasons why we do these things, but just look at all the benefits that came from that. Number one, you modeled flexibility. Who the hell doesn't want to work for a leader who's flexible, right? That's the first thing. Number two, the fact that she's that passionate about her kids tells you something, right? That means she's not going to leave you on the last day in the lurch if she works for you, right? Number three, I guarantee she is telling that story to other people, how flexible you were. Now we're creating a culture, an aura about a school, about a principal, about a committee that people say, I want to work for that school. I want to be a part of that, right? These are the benefits that come from that. And the fact that you're flexible, you're modeling that someday if you do hire them, like in this case you did, my guess she's going to be flexible because you've modeled that. This is the culture that we're creating. She's going to carry the banner and continue to carry the banner. We know, in especially times like this, there is already enough shortages. We're struggling getting some quality candidates sometimes. These things matter because when we hire these people, we want to hire them, in my opinion, it's like a marriage, right? We don't want a divorce. Divorces are ugly. So let's hire these people and let's show that flexibility. So, Andrew, just the fact that you did that and took the time, again, I think those are critical things. And then the last thing I'll say for principals or whoever who have hired people this spring, remember this: if you hired them a month ago or 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago, how about another call? How about another check-in? Hey, Stacy Green. Hey, this is Andrew Mariah. Hey, just checking back in. Hey, just want to let you know I haven't forgotten about you. Super jazzed, can hardly wait. I just wish you good luck for the rest of your school year and can't wait to connect with you once the school year is out. And if you get a chance to stop by here before the end of the school year, whatever, it's just a check-in. And I know that they will appreciate it. Because remember, all this is about creating experiences for other people. We need other people to carry our banner. It can't just be us carrying our own banner. And so the time, the investment, the compassion, the empathy, the gratitude, the sincerity, the genuineness, whatever you want to call it, the fact that you take that time, I believe, is what separates cultures of excellence between cultures that are average. So,
and if you can put yourself in a situation where you're creating this moment that they're going to, not only they'll talk about, but the people that they talk to will talk about. One of the things, and I don't know if you've read The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath, one of the things that they say is really powerful about moments and what people remember about moments is if you're able to boost sensory and boost sensory and break the script. So if you can boost the sensory for either how you make an offer or what happens in that moment, or you can break the script to what normally happens, what the people may have thought about what an interview looks like or feels like, or whatever the case may be, you put yourself in that situation where you break the regular script, you're going to create a moment that people are going to talk about for a long time.
Andrew, any closing thoughts you want to share with us?
Yeah, one last tool, one last strategy. I heard Todd Whitaker talk about this one time, and I tried it, and it's amazing, right? When we call reference checks, and you get these coin phrases, oh, they're fantastic, they're great, right? You don't really ever get any real specifics. There's a lot of laws, privacies, things they can't say. Fine. Todd said, try this question, right? So I'm interviewing, I want to hire Joe Sanfilippo, and I'm asking Joe's boss, well, Joe, how many candidates do you, how many teachers do you have? About 100. Well, where would you rank Joe? What number? Right? And it's going to catch him off guard. Like, whoa, they never got that question before. So he says, well, I would say Joe is, in my top 20. And your follow-up question is, well, how come Joe's not in your top 10? Or how come Joe's not in your top 5? And you're going to get some authentic, real answers and feedback about the candidate that you're looking to hire. So I tried it, and it's an amazing question. So that's a tool I've added to my game as well.
And it's important too, Andrew, because we all know this too. Sometimes we have to hire candidates that aren't excellent, right? But during the interview process, our hope is that we're asking the right questions to get the information we need. So when I hire Joe, I've got enough information to say, hey, Joe, so here's one area that I really want you to understand that is my expectation, because here's an area where we're going to need some growth in, right? So if Joe's not flexible, if we hear some rigidity in the responses, right, then we have to have a conversation with Joe during the onboarding process about what our expectations are and that we're going to need to be flexible, Joe, and here's why we're going to need to be flexible, Joe. And so part of that is to get enough information, because we have to still develop these people. I mean, if we're going to hire them, we better know where their shortcomings are so we can begin to work on those right away. But we have to be really clear up front what our expectation is and the supports that we're going to offer these individuals. So that's a great point, Corrado.
I'm gonna push back on that a little bit because now we're
taking time out.
I'm ready. So we're gonna. So
But
how
you
do we?
think Joe and I agree on everything?
Right,
Oh,
exactly.
no.
So we're gonna take the opinion of a guy that or a girl that we don't know. We've just spent an hour and a half with this candidate. We're gonna take the opinion of somebody that we don't know in that spot and just take it as law and say now we got to improve this person when they come in. Why are we doing that? Why don't we have a conversation and make a marriage in terms of like, well, what do you want to get better at and see if there's some continuity there. But I don't know if I want to take that. I mean, I've talked to this guy or this girl for like 7 minutes and asked them 4 reference questions. And if they say that they need to get better to get to like the top 10% or whatever, and then I'm going to say, well, when you get here, this is my expectation that you do this better when I've never even seen if they can do it. That doesn't make sense to me.
Joe, so what you're saying is I should say to somebody, what do you need to do to get better?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, then are you going to hire that person? I mean, honestly, we're in that spot.
At.
Well, whose opinion
Joe,
are you taking in that moment? Whose opinion are you taking?
Do you think most people even know what they need to get better at? Sometimes we know some things.
I would hope so.
There's other things I don't know that I need to get better at, but I hope that you can see things in me that you think I need to get better at. Joe, you have employees right now. If someone called a reference check of you mean to tell me you couldn't tell a reference check what your principal needs to get better at? You could tell them that, right?
But I don't. How do I know that? How do you know that you can trust me? Because you don't know me.
I think that's part of what Andrew.
You're just calling somebody and saying, "Well, you like ranked this."
Well, I like to hope
somebody in North Carolina that I've never met
would be honest with me about if we're hiring this individual. It's how we present.
Well, what if the principal's awful?
Well, hey, Joe,
I think you'll figure that out, right?
I think
you got to be careful. I'm just saying. I think you got to be careful of saying, "Well, we're going to do it this way because."
Well, here's another story, guys. Here's another story just about this topic. And if you need me to go get my referee shirt out here on March Madness,
Andrew, you wait till the show's over.
But Joe, to your point, so I worked before I got to Port Jervis. When I was moving from the city, I was 1 year at an alternative school. And the leader of the school, I'm not going to.
You went to an alternative school? Why are you talking about when you were a student, Andrew? Nobody cares about that.
She was more of a social worker. She was more of it was a rough spot. These were kids that were being asked to leave Paterson, New Jersey. This was a rough spot. I was more of a disciplinarian. She allowed a little more than I wanted to. I was her assistant principal. Well, the person in Port Jervis who hired me, he said, "What is she going to say about you when I call her?" And I said, to be honest, I don't think her and I saw eye to eye on a lot of things. And when he did call, she was killing me. And she had nothing good to say about me. And finally, the guy who hired me in Port Jervis said, "Well, is there anything good you could say about him? Because I liked him and I'm going to hire him." And she said, he comes to work on time.
Every day. That's right.
Wow, Andrew.
He did see through that.
You still did the job.
There's some good feedback there. I think the thing is in the questioning, right? It's asking the right questions. Like you kind of hinted at it earlier, Andrew, right? If someone says to me, "Well, he's great." Well, great. What makes him great? Tell me what makes him great, right? And so this is what I love about this. This is a perfect example, right? All of us bring different leadership styles to the work that we do, okay? You shouldn't be Joe Sanfilippo. You shouldn't be Jimmy Costas. You shouldn't be Andrew Marotta. Our job on this show is to give you different perspectives and let you decide what fits best into your culture, how it aligns with you. And there's more than one best practice, right? There's not an all or nothing to anything. And so this is a great example of that. And I'm sincere. I tell people all the time, Todd Whitaker and I wrote a book together, but we don't agree on everything. I don't agree with everything with Joe Sanfilippo or Tom Murray or any of the people that I work with. And that's okay. I need those dissenting views because, again, we are always evolving. I've changed my perception on things over time just based on the conversations and the experiences that I've had. And so that's what I love about it. And so, Andrew, thank you so much for being on here. Andrew Marotta, for those of you who are interested, this gentleman here, if you're looking for someone to bring into your school to do workshops or do keynotes or whatever, this is your guy right here. Powerful guy. I've seen him in action. Love you, buddy. Good luck to you and go get it, okay?
Guys, great
show.
Andrew.
Thank you for talking, Andrew.
Keep rolling.
All right.
Yeah, right.
Joe,
that's a perfect example, man.
Say this. I love you. I love you. I hope you know how much I love you.
I do.
You're wrong.
Oh, come on.
Wrong.
So you're the guy. You're the guy that'll say, there's a lot of average, right? There's a lot of average in leadership. You say there's a lot of average, right? I'm telling you. Yeah, right. But if there's a lot of average and we're taking the average at law, like we got to be careful about what we do there, right? Because there are people that, honestly, I want to spend time with the person. You can ask the question and you can get the feedback and you can have the conversation. But if that turns into automatically, this is what I need because I don't know if you did it in the last place, we got to be really careful about that.
Yeah, but I think it's still an entry point to a conversation.
Yeah, it
right?
is. I agree with that. I agree with that.
I mean, how many cover letters have I read that says relationships?
Yeah.
I build relationships. It's all about relationships, right? And then they come into the interview, right? So you're right in the sense that I can kind of sense like this guy doesn't seem like a relationship guy, right? But during the interview, he keeps talking about all these examples and all these things he's done. And so one of the things we do teach is, because let's be honest, again, I go back to how we train our interview teams. Again, we need to help them in terms of when we're interviewing, what are we looking for? I would challenge people, like the next time people are interviewing, take a look at your interview team. You know what most people are doing? They're scripting everything that the candidate says, right? They're just they just script everything. And so one way we teach people is, hey, when you hear things, you're like, write a question that we can then follow up in the reference checks, right? Because again, sometimes we also don't know, right? We've all had experiences for the reference check who just tells us what we want to hear. Yeah. And we've also had experiences with reference checks that have been really powerful. They've given us some insight into that candidate. Hey, Joe, listen, I'll tell you this. The guy cares about kids. He's this, he's this. But one thing I'm going to tell you, sometimes he can be a little rigid. You can do what you want with it. But I don't want you to hire this person and say, Jimmy, you never told me that. If you would have told me that, I'm just telling you, I want to be fair. And I've told the candidate that, by the way. So he knows. I told him, listen, I'll write you the letter of recommendation. And I will say that you care about kids and you're this, but I'm also going to say sometimes you can be a little, short with parents, right? So that's an expectation. You should be working on that, because I'm not going to lie in the reference checks either, but I have a responsibility to tell the candidate, if you want me to do the reference check or write your letter, I'm not also just going to fabricate crap for you either, right? So these are some areas that you can work on. But if you can show me in the next 2 or 3 months that you're willing to work on this, I will say to the person, hey, this has been an area where he struggled. He knows this. I told him I was going to tell you this. But here's the good news. In the last 2 or 3 or 4 or 6 months or whatever, we've seen some improvement. And that's all we can ever ask of anyone to continue to get better, right? So I think it's being fair from both sides. But there's certainly some merit to what you say. But it's always an entry point conversation for me. But I think we can determine what we want to take from that. Because I think sometimes I've done references. I'm like, I'm not sure this person's really helping me with anything, right? And so, but that's what I love about it, right? That's why it's so complex. Hiring the right people is so critical, but sometimes it's not easy to do either. But
it does help. It does help that if you're, one of the things that's been, I think, really helpful for us is being connected. And I think that's a big deal. Like if you're connected locally, if you're connected from a state perspective, if you're a superintendent that knows a lot of other superintendents, that knows a lot of other leaders, whatever the case may be, you can have an authentic conversation where then I would agree with you. If it's an authentic conversation with somebody that you know, that you trust, that you understand, that's a different conversation than me talking to somebody that I have never met, I've never seen lead, I have no idea what their building is like. I hear one thing or other thing about what that district is, and I just can't take that at that's what it is. I can't. But I can if I call you and I say, hey, give me the lowdown. What's going on? Like, is this person, you know me? How is this going to fit? What's going to happen? Now we can have a real conversation about it. But I'm going to put a lot of stock in. I'm going to put a lot of stock in the interview, in the conversation, in the follow-up conversation, in the screener, all the things that go into the piece of the big position, the positions that we hire. I'm going to put a lot of stock into that, and then I'm going to use the reference check as a like just to make sure that
validation, maybe
validation of what we do. Yeah. And honestly, it could come down to it, like the idea that you have to kind of have a conversation about what they're doing and what it's really like, and then you got to decide, like, do you go take a visit? Right? Do you go have a walk through, like to the classroom? Do you go to the place and, whatever the case may be, you have to be comfortable with what the candidate wants as well and be flexible there. But you also have to understand that, you're bringing somebody in to be the best for your kids, your teachers, your whoever department, your district, whatever that you're hiring for. And that's your responsibility as the leader in that space. So, doing everything that we can to be in that spot. And I give our principals like full reign. Go do it. Whatever you feel is comfortable and necessary for you. We talk about what it could look like, but when it comes down to it, like, I'm not the one that's supervising these people. They are. So how are we going to they know their building better than I do, even in a small school. Even in a small school, I can walk through all of these hallways and get a feel for what's going on. But the day-to-day operation, the meetings, the conversations, the in the classroom, those are principal duties, and they know their people a heck of a lot better than I do. And so I want to make sure that they have a ton of ownership in terms of what that looks like. And I can provide my own feedback and I can provide my own, suggestions, but I want them to own it. Because again, if you're building capacity to lead, the place shouldn't look like, well, Joe said. Give these people the opportunity to build what they want to build moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. And we still have to teach and coach them sometimes.
I agree.
Places, right. And so that's
100%.
that insight you're talking about. Here's some things to think about, right? At the end, it's going to be your decision.
Right.
But I just want to, here's some potential traps. Here's some things to think about, because my job is to coach you, right? And to help you and support you through that. But at the end of the day, it's going to be your call, because you're the building principal and you're the one that's going to be evaluating them, right?
That's it. And that's it. It's like the freedom within fences concept, where you say, okay, these are the non-negotiables about what we have and what we believe and who we are. And then we got to figure out a way to do it. Now, if there are other things that are like extenuating circumstances that we're going to get questions from the community or whatever, that's a different conversation, right? Yep. But if you're able to just say, here are the parameters under which we're going to operate, how you get to that place, go. Yep. Like, I trust you. I want to make sure but then at the same time, when it's done, are you following up and asking, how's it going? And are you getting honest feedback from your people, right? Like, I want our principals to say, hey, we felt like it was good at the time. We're struggling here. Can we get some help in this capacity? That's what I want. I want people to tell me that. You don't have to stand up and say, well, I made the decision, so now I'm just going to do everything I can to make sure that it works.
Yeah.
That's not helping you. That's not helping them. How can we get better together?
We are talking hiring this morning on the Jimmy and Joe show. So those of you, if anyone wants to jump in and share a couple thoughts on the items that we're talking about this morning, feel free to jump in with us here this morning. We're talking about hiring, but Joe, let's talk a little bit about the onboarding. Now what? We've hired them. Now what happens? Right?
Oh, man.
Now what happens?
So a couple things that I think, let's start from the interview, the offer process. Like I said, we try to make a moment out of the offer process. So we know so we've gone to places to offer positions. We've had people come in and have the committee offer positions. We've had former, people come in their world that could be there to kind of be in that position. We've, all this stuff. We have when we had our principal hire, our high school principal hire, we had students that led all of the tours, and they were actually active participants in the conversation with our staff, which was brilliant. And I made sure that I told those two students first. I said, hey, we're going to make this hire. Please don't tell anybody yet, but I wanted you guys to know first. This is going to be your principal next year. I haven't told anybody yet, but let's just leave it right there. Give me about 45 minutes to tell staff, but I just want to make sure that you knew first, right? And you were they just sat there like, yeah. All right, man, that's awesome. That's fantastic. That's what we were hoping for. It was really cool, right? But so now we've created a moment for the principal coming in, but we've also created a moment for some kids too. And what are those kids going to do? We can tell kids not to talk about stuff. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to go talk about it, right? They're going to talk about it. They know it. And I think that's a big deal in terms of that. So anyway, so that's the piece, the offer, the conversation, but the onboarding component, I think, gets lost a lot. We have a tremendous mentor program here run by Val Herman at the middle school. She takes care of it across the building. And one of the things that's really important is she makes a great mentor match. And our mentors actually go through a process to know what it looks like to mentor, right? So everything from where are the bathrooms, to what forms do you fill out, to having a conversation about what's going on. You have that mentorship, but you also have almost the informal mentorship where people are going to just gradually connect with other staff members. And you have to keep a real close look at that to make sure that you can cultivate that relationship as well. Because that relationship, like mentor meetings, are going to happen because they're scheduled, right? But the uncharted, informal mentorship that happens, that's going to happen regardless if you want it to or you don't want it to, right? So how are you making sure that you can lean into when the candidate says, well, I've been connecting with this person or that person, Fantastic. Okay, great. So you go and talk to that person and say, just wanted to say thank you so much for connecting with our new candidate. Really made her feel great. Really made him feel great. Have you had the conversation about blah, blah, blah? Have you know what kind of things do you want me to help with as you kind of create that? Can I buy you guys lunch? Like, can you go to, what do you want to do? Like, well, how can we make sure that the conversation continues so they don't feel like they're alone? Because we do a lot of stuff leading up to June 10th when everybody takes off. And then we do a lot of stuff when August 15th happens and they all come back, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what are we doing in the middle to make sure that we still stay connected to people so they know and understand that we can't wait to see them on site? And there are days that I feel like we do that really, really well. And there are days that I feel like we want to get better at that because, you know, sometimes things just slip our minds. So do we have a process in place to make sure that somebody's checking with them over the course of the summer so they feel like they're part of the group when they get here? Are we giving them the gear? Are we making sure that their spouse has the gear? Are we making sure that the kids have the gear? Are we making sure that when they show up to a football game 3 weeks before the school year starts, that they feel like they're part of something bigger, right? That they have the Go Cricket stuff on so they can walk into the football game and feel like they belong. Are we doing all of those things in addition to where's the bathroom? Fill out the form. Here's this, you know, do we need help with lesson planning? Do you need materials? All of that stuff is part of the conversation moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Just what's the culture of the building that they're walking into? Part of those are the managerial tasks that they need that are important. Where to park their car? How do I fill out a leave form? All those. But the thing that you were just sharing there at the end is what about the connection? How do we make how do we help people feel a sense of belonging, like they're already a part of the family before they even start? So when they walk in the first time, they're not looking around going, I feel completely alone and isolated and I feel out, you know, like I don't belong here. So you talked about processes, Joe, right? The processes that we have in place. And that's what I would encourage all leaders is just think about what are the current processes and structures that you have in place to onboard your people. Joe talked about that support. He talked about the importance of influence. Joe talked about the mentorship, right? What I also heard Joe say, which what I really liked a lot, and I think we forget about this, people, we got to train our mentors, right? What are the expectations? We've got to be careful because there has to be some framework that the mentors are going to work with all new people. That's the equity piece. If we just leave it up to them, some are going to be a little bit more skilled at it than others. That means some are getting something and some aren't. So let's just be very clear. What's the structure? What's the framework for the mentors? But then we also want to give them the autonomy within that structure or framework because we all bring our different, you know, skill sets or whatever to that relationship. Joe also mentioned the informal relationships that are going to happen, the influences, right? And so when I think about this, here's what I think, Joe. Who do we want to give the greatest influence over our new people, right? And that's kind of a tricky one sometimes, right? Certainly we have mentors that we've assigned. We want them to influence. We have these informal, but let's not forget about the influence from the administrator who hired the individual too, right? And we want to make sure that that's happening. And we want to make sure, remember, when we hire people, typically we think we've got the right hire. We're so excited. Look at all the potential. We got an excellent hire. We got a rock star, whatever that is. How are we ensuring? What's our process that we have in place to ensure that they maintain that status of excellence throughout the year? So one of the things we always encourage administrators is make sure you're doing formal, here we go again, formal check-ins with your new people. Not only individually, but I would also encourage you to think about doing it in a cohort. So if I hired 4 people, I'd be meeting at least regularly, which to me means about monthly with that cohort of people. Why is that important? Well, if you're in a middle school, or it doesn't matter what level, elementary, middle, high, but the idea is when people come in, they gravitate to the team that they're being hired in, the math team, the 7th grade team, the kindergarten team. Well, we unintentionally then can still create these little small pockets. We want them to have that close-knit family, but how do we make sure that we create an environment where everybody knows everybody and people know their stories, and we create this culture where everybody wants to be a part of this larger community? Well, sometimes we have to be a little strategic. We have to be intentional. So the idea of meeting with a cohort monthly throughout the year is because if you hired a kindergarten teacher and a 3rd grade teacher and a special education teacher and a music teacher and a paraeducator, we make another cohort where those people begin to connect with people outside their grade level team or outside the department. And that's really, really important of cultures of excellence. So this is about building community. So strategically, we're trying to build community. The individual meeting is to constantly be taking a temperature check on where they're at. Hey, Joe, it's now September 28th. You've been a month on the job, my friend. Are you still as excited today as you were on August 28th when you walked in the door? And then hopefully they're saying yes. And if not, they're like, whoo, yeah, I still love it. But man, I didn't expect this to be. All right, talk to me a little bit about that. What are some things, right? And we're having conversations. So we want to make sure that they stay excellent. And we also play a role in that, because we do know, Joe, that sometimes those outside informal influences sometimes aren't so positive.
Right.
They create undercurrents for us in our culture of our organization. So we have to make sure that these people that we brought in, so a framework, right? So you have this hiring stage or the selection stage, but then there's a growing stage, which is this. This is why the monthly meeting is important, because you gotta constantly grow the mindset, right? We can't talk about teaching or transforming teaching and learning, and then we haven't transformed this. But there's also that developmental stage, which is the skill sets, developing their skills, how we build it, then the multiply, how are we building capacity. So this is really about being intentional. And Joe, one of the things you do really well is that last step is, how are we honoring our people? So again, we're going to model the connections. We can't say, I'm about relationships, but I hired a new person and I haven't met with them formally since last June when I hired them. And so that's the mindset always. It's always about connections. It's always about relationships. And we have to invest our personal time. So let's be intentional in doing that on a regular basis and not saying, crap, I hired a new teacher and I really haven't checked in with her on one-on-one, except informally to stop by her classroom. But that's not what I'm talking about. It's sitting down. What do you need from me? How are you doing? What can we do? What's your experience been so far? Where are you struggling? What's going well? All those types of things. And then, right. And so it's just really important that we be really intentional in that during the onboarding process.
Yeah. So the balance that I struggle with, and just to be truly transparent about it, is that I feel like I want to know where the balance is between from a superintendent lens to a principal lens. Like I want to know, I want our principals to have the best relationship with those new teachers, to meet and connect and grow. And I don't want it to feel like, well, when the superintendent comes in and has the same conversation, is that reflecting, like, am I going over the top of a process that should already be created? Like, what's the balance between, do we do both? Do we overwhelm them? Like, oh, now the principal and the superintendent talk to me. Like, what's going on? Am I okay? Right? Like, you're having those.
Just so I'm clear, Joe, are you talking about you're meeting with the principal, or are you talking about you meeting with the teacher?
With the teachers, yeah. So you have a new teacher that comes in, and you're doing, So I feel like. Yeah, so I struggle with that because I want them to own that process, but I don't want to go over the top of it, but I also want to be invested in it. And I don't do a great job of meeting with new teachers as they come on, a monthly. And hopefully I get a couple times throughout the course of the year to just sit down and talk with them and say, hey, is there anything that you need? Is there anything that we can do for you? How to go? Well, I'll talk with them at the end of the year, in the next couple months, next month or so, just to say, what else do you need? Is there how to go? That kind of thing. But I know the principals are having these conversations along the way. Yeah. I don't want to usurp, I don't want to go over the top of that. And I want them to have the relationship, but I don't want the teachers to feel like I'm sleeping. Right. Yeah. So that's a tough balance for me. And I think in a small school, it's probably a tougher balance, honestly, because in a bigger school, I don't know if the expectation is, if you've got, you got 800 teachers, how that really works from a superintendent lens. But it does from a smaller school district. It does kind of, it feels like I can walk down the hallway and have the conversation.
Yeah. Well, we got Emily in the house.
Hi, Emily.
Emily a chance to chat. Emily, she's like driving. She's like jumping in.
No, she's not driving.
I mean, well, I probably didn't say that right. She's sitting in a car, so she's dedicated. So Emily, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. So I wanted to share, I know that you were talking about wanting the interviewees to leave, wanting to be a part of the school. And something I wanted to add that I've been on the interview, I've been the interviewee recently. I'm an aspiring administrator, and there were 3 places that called me back afterwards that told me that I didn't get the job, but gave me feedback, positive feedback. And then this is what we would have needed from you. One was the assistant principal from Lincoln Middle School in Kenosha, the leader of UCC education in Milwaukee, and most recently the assistant superintendent from Muskego called. And that really said something to me, that they took that time,
Mhm.
that they really cared about me and my own process and valued that. And that it's so much more personal than getting that email.
Yeah, it makes all the difference, doesn't it? I always tell people the worst thing we can do is not call candidates back or
No.
just drop an email or send a formal up. Look, they took the time to come into your school, traveled all the way there, took the time to interview. Well, we can't have the courtesy just to call them back and saying, hey, thank you so much, Emily, for coming in. Hey, unfortunately, we're not going to offer you a position, but listen, I want to talk to you a little bit about your interview. If you're willing to take some feedback, because here's the thing, Emily, you're going to get a job. We need you in the profession. And here's a couple things that we think may help you in your next interview, right? And
Right.
just be honest and give people some feedback in that and help them, right? I mean, we need people in our profession, right? We should be helping
Right.
anybody who wants to go into this profession. And I know sometimes people can,
Yeah.
where am I going to find the time to do this? And I keep telling people, this is the most important time, right? This is our impact. This is our influence. This is our gift to people. This is why we went into the profession, right? To help others, to be that servant leader. So that is great. It just makes me happy to hear that, right? Because it gives me hope that, yes, people are doing the right thing and taking care of our people and in trying to inspire Emily, hang in there. Your time's going to come. It's going to be the right fit, and you're going to get a job at some point. So that's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So we appreciate it. Joe, any thoughts on that?
And guys,
Yeah, no, there a couple. I think sometimes that's the hardest conversation to have, because I don't think they want to talk to you at that point. And honestly, I don't know if like sometimes it's the balance of, hey, I'd love to tell you more about the process, and you did some really great things. And if at any point you want to have that conversation, I would love to do that with you. I don't know if now is the right time, right? But it's up to you. And because that's hard sometimes. You just say, we loved you. We loved you. We loved every part of it. You did some really great things, but we decided to go in a different direction. And now, do we now lose the conversation moving forward because they're stuck on the fact that they didn't get the next step, right?
Yeah.
So again, that's a balance that I don't know if I think maybe it's almost like a feel at that point. If you feel like you've had the conversation, if you feel like you're in a good enough spot to have the conversation, have the conversation. If not, offer the opportunity moving forward. Because you're right. We want great people in the profession. We also want to make sure that they're in the right space to hear the feedback that we have.
Yeah. And again, people, it's just a reminder again, right? Everybody has different ways they approach it, right? We're just trying to think in terms of best practices. For me, it always goes back. I'm going to align my behavior with my core values.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to say I'm going to be champion, or I'm going to invest time, or I'm going to model, or I'm going to carry the banner, I can't say that and then not do that.
Yeah.
So that's where it comes from me. Again, I'm not saying I'm right, but that's just the approach that I take. And so if it works for you, keep doing what works for you. I'd rather have those experiences, because it is still about connections. You see the impact it made on Emily. How can we go wrong there, people? You saw there, right? And you hear this all the time. And Joe, I actually took a call this week from someone for the same situation. They're frustrated. They said, Jimmy, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I keep interviewing and no one gives me a chance. And we were talking. And here's the one thing she said that just broke my heart. Two of the places didn't even call her back. So she's never even heard back. I mean, come on, people. The next thing is, she said, one person called her and said, well, I really liked you, but the committee wanted to go a different direction. Please don't do that. Don't throw your committee under the bus. Just own it. Just own it. None of this committee stuff. If you're going to do that, just say we then. But don't throw the committee under the bus either.
I totally agree with that.
Yeah, right? I just hate
totally.
Right? So, Joe, as we close here, I want to go back to what you said, because I think as a superintendent, you're absolutely right. Like, where's your balance? It's like the HR director, right? Where's the HR director's role? So here's one thing to think about, principals. You do want to be intentional, because from an HR or a superintendent, but one of the things is, first is, if I'm a superintendent, I'm first going to model that by having those same conversations with the principals, with the hope that they replicate that best practice with their team. I do think it's appropriate if they're working with the principals, that for Joe or any superintendent, say, hey, I'm just going to ask you one favor. I love the way you meet with your teachers on a monthly basis. If there's any time, just one time, that I could stop by and be a part of that meeting, just to be an observer, I would just love to reconnect with that teacher, because I want them to know who their superintendent is. I guarantee every principal will say, absolutely, be there.
Right.
The other option could be is to work with your building principals and say, hey, I've been thinking about this. We had all these new hires in the district. I would love to kind of have a meeting with all of them, just to do a check-in with them, just the superintendent, and provide some foods and just have some conversations to support you as the building principal. And so maybe that's a way too, is to do a cohort one-time meeting or something like that. But I don't think it's inappropriate, and I think it's actually appropriate for an HR director, superintendent to sit in those meetings maybe once in the first or once in the second, just as an observer, to say thank you, because we do want them to know who the superintendent is, and we do want that connection, and we should want that connection. Superintendents, we need to stay connected at the building level, not only just with our principals, but our teachers and our pairs and our support staff and all those that work in our buildings. And I think that would be a really powerful thing. So, Joe, I'm going to let you close it here because we are at the hour. And thank you for all those who jumped in today, Andrew and Emily, and for those who stayed around in the chat. Joe, take it home for us, buddy.
I don't know if I can, Jimmy. I think that was it, man. I think you did a great job of getting us out of here. I just love having the conversation. I love the fact that we can go back and forth and talk about kind of what it looks like for you, what it looks like for me, what it looks like for any of the other people that are listening. But when it comes down to it, when we're leading, if we're always leading from our core values, from what we've established and what we want to model, we're going to have a better opportunity moving forward. And if we can do that, we're going to be in a better place. So thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. We'll be back at it next week. Have a good. Oh, don't forget, if you need Cricket Cup merch, need Cricket Cup merch, give me a call. I know a guy. Be good, everybody. Take care. Everybody. Go Crickets.